actually are saying that it's in dysfunctional families as well. These are behaviors you pick up as a child and you take into your adulthood. And they can, once they recognize it, can be changed. So what we're going to do tonight is just look at your family and my family. And I'm going to go through this in more detail. But you'll see in the center, those are the victims. They're normally the chemically dependent ones, our addicts, okay, and our loved ones that are in recovery right now. Underneath, straight underneath, you'll see the chief enabler. It could be mom, dad, gran, we don't know, but you'll have a chief enabler. They will try and enable to keep the peace with the addicts, and they also try to keep the peace with the rest of the family. So what I'm going to do is just start, and you'll start to see what happens as it. And then you've got the 4 different children, which we will go through. Your family hero, your scapegoat, your lost child, and your mascot. So if we look at this and we look at the family system, okay, and we see how it works, children that grow up in homes where addiction is prevalent, they don't know their roles, what roles to take in adulthood, and it becomes very confusing. So what we look at is the family system and the roles. The first is your victim. They're normally externally irresponsible, chemically dependent addicts and alcoholics. On the outside, this is what they usually portray: hostility, manipulation, aggression, blame, and can be charming. Inside of them, which is what we're going to look at, is they have shame, guilt, fear, and pain. So if we look at the slide of a chemically dependent person, you'll see in the middle, in the white, it says wall of defenses. So those are all the defenses we will display, because internally we have the shame, we have the guilt, we have the hurt, and all that starts to come out. So you'll often find in a chemically dependent person and in the victim mode, they have legal problems, charming, promiscuous, can be very, very manipulative, blaming, they intellectualize, they have self-pity, denial, anger, defensiveness, deviant, rule breakers, abusive, rationalize, perfectionism, grandiosity, they're rigid, vengeful, powerful, bitter, violent, rage, and they have a lot of vulgar speech. So this is not the chemically dependent, and this is how the structure would work. We then come to our chief enabler. This is the protector of the family, the one that wants to try and protect, and we call them super responsible. So when we look at our chief enabler, they are often the ones that get held hostage by the addict, and they start to keep secrets, or they lie, or they try and protect, or they cover up. But on the outside, they project the self-righteousness, this super responsible, can be sarcastic, very passive, physically ill, and martyr. On the inside, we see the anger, the hurt, the guilt, and the low self-esteem. And when we look at that chief enabler, you'll see how the inner circle shows us that they have feelings of guilt, low self-esteem, anger, unmet needs. They don't have their needs met. And we often find as well, your chief enabler is the people pleaser. Will jump in and want to do everything. So even on the external wall of defense, we see the protectiveness, nagging, caretaker, guilt trips, always right, very righteous, sarcastic, excuses, over or underweight, worries a lot, gives in, covers up, overworked, powerless, self-blaming, passive, self-pity, controlling, and there's always often manipulation and that martyrdom. So that's our chief enabler. So we've seen how it's going. The next that we're going to look at is the children that then become the adults of addicts and alcoholics, and what characteristics they display and how they can change that once they recognize this. So your hero, the little enabler, normally the one who's usually the firstborn, okay? On the outside, a good kid, high achiever, follows rules. I think very important here, they seek approval. So that is often the hero characteristics, and they're very responsible. Inside, you will see the hurt, the guilt, and the inadequacy. Sorry. Okay, so our little hero often provides the worth in the family. You know, the better I do, focus can come off, etc. So when we look at the inner space that they're trying to protect, is that inside they're insecure, have lots of guilt, feelings of inadequacy, and they hurt and they have fear. Externally, you'll find that the togetherness, friends, they're the caretaker, high achievers, always right. They sort things out. They can't relax. They follow rules. They leave home at an early age. We also see that what happens over here is when we look at this, we'll see that there's goodness, there is professionalism, there are approval seekers, which we said, they're overly responsible and they can't fail. They want praise, they want to be the best, and they want to accept, they want to succeed all the time. So that's normally the firstborn, very, very much perfectionistic, very much gets quite hard on themselves if they don't achieve what they set out to achieve. Then comes our scapegoat. The scapegoat is usually the secondborn, and the scapegoat provides focus. So often we'll see with the scapegoat, outside, they're hostile, they're defiant, they're rule breakers, and they get into trouble. Inside, we see a lot of rejection, hurt, guilt, jealousy, and anger. And this is what's so important here, is they don't want to be the hero, but they are always the ones that are getting into trouble. And we look at that scapegoat and we see they provide focus. Look at me. You know, I'll be naughty, take the focus of everyone else, okay? So they can be sullen, very hostile, promiscuous, school problems, failing, fights, drug and alcohol abuse, always in trouble, messy room, rule breaker, unplanned pregnancies, won't compete with the hero. This is definitely, they're not in competition with the hero. They have acting out, they're never at home, very defiant, also profanity there. You know, they have strong peer pressure in the wrong crowds, and they can be very rebellious. So that's our scapegoat, the secondborn. The next, which is usually the thirdborn, is the lost child. Usually the thirdborn provides the relief. So what we see on the outside, they can be shy and quiet, live in fantasy, live a fantasy life. They're solitary, mediocre, and they attach to things, external things. It's very interesting to see that they often get attached to animals. But you'll find that this the actual lost child, you never know what's going on because of the quietness. Internally, what we're seeing is rejection, hurt, and a lot of anxiety. So this is what we see in the lost child, where they provide relief. Without, we'll look at the wall of defense, but inside, just to emphasize the rejection, anger, loneliness, hurt, and anxiety. External, what they show is isolation, fantasy life, distant, quiet, cults, shy, aloof, withdrawn, emotional problems, problems with sexual identity, unresolved issues, where they on their own, attached to things, i.e. the animals, and also they're very, very possessive of what they've got. Very indecisive, they can't make decisions, they're followers. They try to remain invisible and independent, and often perform mediocre, and they can be depressed as well. The fourth one we come into, which is usually our last born, and this one is the mascot. The mascot often provides the distraction. We even call the mascot the joker of the family. Outside, there's a lot of immaturity. Fragile, can be cute, hyperactive, and incredibly distracting. The inner fears of fear, anxiety, and insecurity. Just going to have a quick sip of water here, sorry. As we say, mascot can be the last born, and the mascot provides the distraction. They have a cuteness about them, they can't handle stress, they're the family clown, they have ulcers, they're immature, they wear masks, they're funny, they never get serious. Anything to attract attention, but this is different from your scapegoat. They have a short attention span, hyperactive, school clown, loud dresser, charming, fragile, and humorous. So those are the family structures, and that's what we're going to look at. What we're going to see now and what we're going to go through is what children that grow up in homes where alcohol and drugs are known, okay? They don't know what to expect from one day to the next, okay? And that's the truth. It's like a home of predictability and unpredictability. There is never serenity. There's arguments, inconsistency, unreliability, and chaos tends to run rampant, okay? Children of addicts and alcoholics don't have their own needs met or fulfilled. This often leads to skewed behaviors and a lot of difficulty in properly caring for themselves and their feelings. I think that's important as well. If you were never given attention and emotional support because of the preoccupation that we're looking at with the dysfunctional behaviors, it may certainly be hard to know how to get these needs met as an adult. It really is. Also, if you lack positive foundational relationships in childhood, and as a child, it may be difficult to develop healthy, trusting, interpersonal relationships as they grow older. So adult children of addicts and alcoholics often have to deny their own feelings of fear, anger, and that's in order to survive. The unresolved feelings will always resurface, and this manifests in adulthood. The advantages to recognize is that they are adults now and no longer the helpless child. They can face their issues and find a resolution that they couldn't as a child. Okay, so the work's been done on adult children for a long time, and many adult children alcoholics develop similar characteristics and personality traits. And the one person, the late Janet Vovitz, she was an author of the best-selling book, Adult Children of Alcoholics, discovered this as she was married to an alcoholic. Based on her own personal experiences with alcoholism and its effect on her children, as well as her work as a lecturer and counselor in the field, discovered in dysfunctional families, these common traits are characteristic and prevalent, and not only in alcoholics and addict families, but those who also grew up in families where there was a compulsive behaviors and also a lot of dysfunction. So what Dr. Jan found, that children of addicts and alcoholics often guess what is normal because they actually don't understand what normal is. They have difficulty following a project through from beginning to end. They lie when it would be easy to tell the truth, but lies came so easy in the dysfunction as a child that they often lie. They judge themselves without mercy. They have difficulty having fun. They take themselves very seriously. They have difficulty with intimate relationships. They overreact to change, which they have no control over. They're constantly seeking approval and affirmations. Feel that they're different from other people. They are super responsible or super irresponsible. There is an impulsivity, and people may tend to lock themselves in to a course of action with that impulsivity without giving serious consideration to the alternative behavior or the possible consequences. The person's impulsivity can lead to confusion, self-loathing, and a loss of control over their environment. In addition, the person spends an excessive amount of energy cleaning up their mess. We're looking at a laundry list now, and this was done by a guy, Dr. Before Jan's book, sorry. This was done before Jan's book, and this is a laundry list which was developed in 1978 by an adult child of alcoholics, Tony A. And it was called the laundry list because it also shows very similar characteristics that we've seen with Dr. Jan, and that are often taken into adulthood as well, and they develop this dysfunction. Tony's list has been adapted as part of the Adult Children Alcoholics Worldwide Organization's official literature, and is based on the article, The Problem, published on the group's website. So according to Tony's list, many adult children of alcoholics they become isolated, they fear people and authority figures, become approval seeking, incredibly frightened of anger and angry people, and avoid the confrontation. They are terrified of personal criticism, become addicts and alcoholics, marry them, or both. They view life as a victim. They have an overwhelming sense of responsibility. They be concerned more with others than themselves. They can focus on someone else, not themselves. They feel guilty when they stand up for themselves. They become addicted to excitement, okay? And we often say that there's an addiction to the chaos. They confuse love and pity. Love people who need rescuing because of their unfulfilled needs. If they can believe they can fix someone else, they will rescue. They bottle up their feelings, so they stuff them. They lose the inability to feel. They have a low self-esteem. They judge themselves harshly, become terrified of abandonment, do anything to hold on to relationships. They become what we call para-alcoholics. These are people who take on the characteristics of the disease without drinking. They become reactors instead of actors. So ACA, or what we call the adult children of adults and alcoholics, many children of addicts and alcoholics lose themselves in their relationship with others, sometimes finding themselves attracted to addicts, alcoholics, or other compulsive personalities, such as a workaholic or people who are unemotionally available. Adult children may often form relationships with others who need their help or need to be rescued, to the extent of neglecting their own needs. If they place focus on the overwhelming needs of someone else, they don't have to look at their own difficulties and shortcomings. Often adult children of addicts will take on the characteristics of alcoholics and addicts, and that's where we saw the para. And even through this, they never picked, and they won't pick up a drink or a drug. They exhibit denial. They have poor coping skills, poor problem solving, and the forming of dysfunctional relationships. This is something that, you know, we always look at and we start to see as they grow up into the adult child. What we're going to do now, Brian, I think I'm going to go back to this slide. And I think, you know, there's a lot of discussion that needs to take place on the characteristics. Okay. And, you know, I think that a lot of children that come from addict and alcoholic backgrounds, okay, they often have their childhood robbed from them. You know, they don't know what it's like to be a child because of that predictable unpredictability, you know, and it becomes a tough situation. And I think that's why there's a lot of acting out. So, you know, when we go through the laundry list or Dr. Jan Vower's list, we see a lot of similarities. We see the insecurity. We see the low self-esteem. And we see a lot of this coming into treatment as well.
And I think that I know if I was a parent and I've never drank, you know, I would wonder why is my child exhibiting these symptoms, even though I haven't drunk. And I think it's important for us to understand that dysfunction can come in different forms, you know, as long as whatever it is that has made you emotionally unavailable, that's where the dysfunction begins. It can be because you're drinking, it can be because you're working too much, it can be because you don't know how to connect emotionally with your children. But what we're saying is that the biggest concept about this is emotionally unavailable. Whatever distracts you creates a child who has the symptoms, and this child eventually becomes an adult.
And they take that into the adults. So they are dishonest about what they're feeling. The actual true feelings are not met. They're usually negated. Okay. And it's often that because of their insecurity, they look for approval. You know, they do that a lot. And I think a big one here is the anger. They have so much internal anger that they are frightened of angry people because they're not sure how they're going to respond. You know, they have never been able to deal with anger in a healthy way.
Yes,
because around them,
or their anger has been invalidated. You can't feel that. Don't have to feel that. You're wrong for feeling that.
Yeah. And they often live with the masked anger, the explosive anger, and the chronic anger. So they grow up like that. So to them, they have this need not to avoid. They don't want to confront. because they're not sure what response they will get. And even the criticism there, you know, that's the end of the world in a lot of ways. And we see loved ones in treatment like that.
And as I was looking through your list, Tony's list, become isolated. I mean, of course, that plays so much into addiction, because naturally, if you're using substances, you're going to isolate. But it's not because they're hiding away from families. Not that the family is not the drug addiction. It's because they've been invalidated for so long that they can't be vulnerable. They would rather create this isolation in their world than be exposed to being judged or vulnerable.
And it's what's so true when we look at this. This is your codependent as well, because if they can focus on someone else and try fix that person, they don't actually have to look at what's going on for them.
Yes. I think it also ties into, there's a point there that says confuse love and pity, and love people who need rescuing. And if you pity someone, that's what you're going to do. You're going to step into this relationship in order to rescue the other person, which, Clive, I'm sure you can attest to this, the codependency that we see, where the individual is more focused on making the other person quite cody as well.
Yeah, very cody. And it's often adult child stuff that's coming up.
Yeah, and I think a lot of family members on this might be triggered by what they see through this. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box. If something strikes home, please, it would be ideal you talk about it. This is your platform. This is something that we created in order for you to learn about yourself and also about your loved one's disease.
So we're encouraging you to, ask questions, come forward and let's talk, discuss this, because this adult child behavior goes so deep in the work and the damages and the need to work on as an adult. We have put up some support groups as well. Okay. So we do have that up for you. So if you want to take a note of that, we often have the Al-Anon, and I've given you the website over there. ACCA, adult children of addicts, CODA, and we've given you the CODA South Africa, and the Nar-Anon as well. I'd love to hear from people.
I want to highlight something that was quite important. Usually when, especially some people that are on this platform, when you grow up in an environment where there's a lot of dysfunction, maybe it could be because of drinking, you make a decision and you say, maybe I will not drink alcohol like the way my father did, or I will not drink alcohol like my grandfather did. And in your slide, there was something that talks about para-alcoholics, where the person hasn't picked up alcohol, but because alcohol impacted them in their growing up, they've taken on the characteristics even without the alcohol. I don't know if you want to maybe just elaborate on that, because we see a lot of families coming to us and saying, but I don't drink. How can my child have all these characteristics when I've never picked up alcohol?
Yes, and that's important what you're saying, because that para-alcoholic, taking on the characteristics, what have they learned as a child? Very important. They might not drink, but they bring those behaviors of the addict and alcoholic into their adulthood. And I think that's important. Because of their molding, they get to the situation of, and a lot of people are very anti-drinking, but they have still brought those behaviors, those addictive behaviors into their adulthood.
And I think this is where we also see, if you saw your parents drinking, you want your children not to drink, so then you tend to control them, which is also part of para-alcoholic characteristics, where you're trying to control other people from becoming what you experienced.
And as well, they can be the enabler. They've come from, like your hero would become the chief enabler. as they grow up, because that's what they know to enable, to fix, to keep secret, and the dishonesty. And I think that's a lot of stuff, because a lot of our work in treatment is feelings. What feelings are coming up? And I think when we look at addiction, we locked our feelings with the drugs and alcohol.
Yep.
So as soon as any feeling came, we blocked it.
That makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. We all know how numbing any substance can be. So you can wonder, what is my child trying to numb? Why is my child so invested in not feeling that they've ended up in treatment? What are they avoiding to feel? And it's sometimes it's because they're unable to deal with these feelings of abandonment. It's hard for them to deal with these feelings. They don't even know how to cope with them. Either they become angry or passive aggressive, or they move, or whatever they do, but we can see that dysfunction sometimes, most times, as a result of their inability to feel.
Yes, and I think what's important as well is that when we see this dysfunction, and we see it in treatment, as soon as there's that vulnerability, there is the external stuff. What's happening on the outside? My child, this one, I need to get my business done. All that comes in to focus on everything but the problem. And I think what's so important is what we're trying to work with is that they look at the problem. Nobody's asking questions or putting their hand up or anything.
No questions. Okay. I mean, it's quite a very sensitive topic. I think it's a topic that really raises a lot of introspection on when you finally look at the person in treatment as a victim. All of a sudden the chairs change. Now you have to put yourself in a chair and hold yourself accountable. So it is quite a very sensitive topic. But I see Marie's
just before we add Marie in, what we look at when we look at this, because I come from an adult child, okay, and the fear, they often say, my kids are young, they didn't see anything. But from 3 years of age, I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was up.
Yeah. There's a famous book by a psychologist. It's called The Body Keeps Stock. And it talks about that your mind, you probably try to block that out in order to survive the emotional turmoil, but your body keeps track of that stuff.
And that's a lot of the denial that we have with a lot of the addicts that have got children. They can't see that a child will pick up a behavior, often before the adult or the enabler.
But I think as a person in recovery, because I'm also a person in recovery, the best thing that you can do for your loved ones, especially considering the biology, considering the impact, is to stay sober. If you stay sober, one day down the road, your child will be mature enough to have conversations with you about their experiences. But God forbid and touch wood, if a child ends up with this same disease, they need to see an example of someone that has walked this journey and is now sober. Once we get clean, once we get sober, there's always that role that anyone around us that we've had an impact on, if they ever need help, I should be there to support them through it, because I know it's a disease. I know if it's genetic, my child probably has it, right? So I need to be there when they need the support years down the line. So I guess just stay sober, Justin. Just keep doing what you're doing, one day at a time.
One day at a time. And often if they see something happen or look at someone and they can see a behavior in drunkenness and a recovery, it is, you must have been scared when I drank like that. Let's get honest. Talk to them about that. But I also think as adults, it's not to promise, but to be consistent. If you can have that consistency instead of the unpredictable, the predictable unpredictability, once there's constant, there becomes a stabilizer again.